Hi, everyone. Welcome to this presentation of Unraveling Neurodevelopmental Disorders. My name is Dr. Enrico Dolcecore. I've been a chiropractor in Canada and the US for over 15 years, helping kids on the spectrum through natural health care. And we're going to dissect a little bit about autism in general in this presentation. I do it live in my office almost quarterly or every other month. This is a digital presentation, so please feel free to send me any questions you have personally to our clinic. I love answering questions, and I love teaching the community about how we can help families navigate these waters. You can find us on Facebook. We're at Full Life Chiropractic. We love to answer questions on there as well. Make sure you follow us there so you can always be on top of all the posts that we help support our communities with, and it helps get the message out there to more people. The chiropractors at our office are all pediatric and family certified through the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association. We focus on neurodevelopmental disorders. We're part of many different memberships as far as the ICPA, Blair Society, Autism Foundation, and we follow a salutogenesis model, meaning an approach that we focus on the human's natural and health and well-being rather than factors that cause disease. So we don't just focus on the symptoms, we look at the whole person when it comes to helping them with their health care. Testimonials here, we have hundreds of them from families with the success stories that we get. And if you're not in the Tampa area where we currently are, we can help you. Just send a message out to us and we'll find someone close to you that is ICPA certified, autism friendly, autism knowledgeable, and you can get great results as well. This was a 6-year-old complaining of headaches. I'm just showing you some of the results we get with kids is that headaches are never normal, but we're really good with kids. And that's what separates a pediatric office from a normal office or any other office, is that we've learned how to work with kids and we make the office surround families rather than a professional setting where kids are not always focused on. Under the autism umbrella, we have nonverbal, non-motor, all the way to high functioning. So the umbrella is quite large, or the wheel of the autism spectrum is quite large. Audrey here was a nonverbal child that came in at the age of 4, still not saying any words. But we started seeing changes quite quickly with her, and she had great results moving forward from there. Everything I go through in this workshop is from these 10 books. So in the top left-hand corner, you can see Disconnected Kids with Dr. Robert Melillo, all the way down to Social, Cognitive, and Affective Neuroscience. So I put these in order of, most readable to the bottom right-hand corner being probably the one that's going to put you to sleep within 10 minutes, the most boring. But neuroscience, as boring as it is really important to understand in order to help people and to understand how the brain works. And that's what this presentation is going to be based around, is not only what does the brain do, but how does it work and how do we adapt to it to help with changes. So my goal with any workshop I do on any topic is about, what's going on, why is it happening, and what do we do next? And how do we create a plan to move forward, whatever it is. Autism overall, its prevalence has increased by 300% since 2000. So from 1995 to 1999, there was an increase. And then from 1999 to 2000, we saw a huge jump from 1 in 500 children to 1 in 150. But what happened in 1999 and 2000 is the autism spectrum was redefined. They put a lot more of the conditions underneath the umbrella. So it wasn't just autism. It is now what we know as the autism wheel. So from ADHD, OCD, tics, Tourette's, everything was put underneath that umbrella. So it was a change in diagnosis. So we understand what happened in 2000. But what we're trying to understand is, since 2000, why are we still seeing a rapid increase in autism? We're at now in 1 out of 36. They're saying by 2050, we're going to be at 1 in 20 children will be on this spectrum. So Dr. Thomas Insel, from the director of National Institute of Mental Health, said the burden of proof is upon anybody who feels that there is not a real increase here in the number of kids affected. And it's true. It just keeps increasing and increasing. Yes, autism and awareness and diagnosis is increased, but why is it continuing to increase? That's the questions we need to ask. 7.4 million kids between the ages of 4 and 17 currently have been diagnosed with ADHD as of 2021. And the issue with ADHD is the comorbidities that come with it, meaning that with ADHD, we have other conditions that end up happening with it. We have substance use disorders. You can see this, 15% of kids diagnosed with ADHD are more likely to abuse substances. 19.6% have impulse control disorders. 38% of them have mood disorders, and almost 50% have anxiety disorders, because things like ADHD are diagnosed early, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And what happens is they're labeled like that. So then they have to go to school as an ADHD kid. And they know this. Parents know this. The teachers know this. They're labeled. They might be bullied, but they're labeled at an early age. And they live with this as a burden. And that burden leads to anxiety because it infiltrates everything in their lives. And what I teach in the in-house workshops is that when we label children early on with anything, this is just one big one, ADHD, they live with this burden. So we have to not undermine the diagnosis, but not make the child a label. We have to just work around it, saying, hey, attention deficit hyperdisorder just means that we have to work on focus a little bit more. And when we get into chiropractic care and brain-based care, is we teach them that, they're perfectly normal. We just have to retrain the brain to create new synapses. And we'll get into this. OCD, that's a bigger one too. 2 to 3% of kids are diagnosed with OCD. We got 9 million kids with anxiety disorders, and 32 million kids, almost half the kids in America, have at least one of 20 chronic health conditions. So the whole picture we're trying to paint here is that we have an epidemic of many endemics. We have a lot of things going on that are affecting our children. And in the top left-hand corner here, you see the autistic spectrum disorder wheel. This is the modern one that they've changed, and they've added sensory integration disorders, behavioral integration disorders, auditory processing disorders, depression, ADD, OCD, anxiety, Tourette's, OCD, development coordination disorders, and even the gifted children are put onto this wheel. And that's why in 2000 we saw that massive increase in labeling and diagnosing, is because they redefined the wheel. But so now when we start trying to figure out why, we go straight to genetics. We always do in medicine, is we look, is it there a genetic component? Because if it's genetic, then there's not much control that we have that we can do from the outside. So we try and prove that something is genetic, but the autism genetic landscape over the last 50 years hasn't shown much proof behind genetics. And we can see this little graph down here showing 82% of all the children diagnosed with autism that have done the genetic testing or genetic studying has shown that there's an unknown or no multifactorial type of genetic predisposition to this. The other 18% may fall into one of these categories of a single gel or a single gene inherited component, which is the smallest, 3% of them, or a chromosomal anomaly that may happen, and gene mutations. So that makes up about 15% of the genetic research that we have so far, which does not explain the other 85% of what's going on. So we can't blame simply genetics, something that's not just genetically passed on. And some of us may have heard of PANS or PANDAS, the pervasive development disorders that are linked to some type of infection that happens on in childhood that may affect the brain in a way to give results of autism. So Asperger's disorder, Rett's disorder, pervasive development disorders, child disintegrative disorders can all stem from PANS or an infection that brings out the phenotypes of autism. So an infection component as well, so which is non-genetic, completely non-genetic. It means that some type of bacteria or virus reaction in the body, the histamine production to that, or the inflammation result from that, alters the brain's synaptic potentials in some form. It could be speech, it could be motor, it could be behavior, it could be an array of things that can happen because of a bacterial or viral infection. So we move on to, how does the human, how does anything work? Why do mechanical systems work? What do they need? And we teach in our workshops that every mechanical system has parts, like your car has parts, and it requires power, gasoline, and a battery. And it's the information that we put onto it or into it that makes it move and work and function. You have to physically go into the car, start the engine, put it into drive, and work the machine so that it can actually move, right? Elon Musk is fixing this. It'll all be robotic at some point, but even that will need parts and power and information be put into it. Same thing with the computers that we use. This computer that I'm using right now has my PowerPoint presentation. It has the information. It's got power to it. It's got a system to it. It's linked to this webinar. And the parts and the power are all there. But if I didn't put the information into this PowerPoint and don't keep hitting the space bar here, then it's never going to go through the presentation. So it requires information. And so do we. What do living systems need to work properly? We need information. We have the parts, we have the power. We have the parts of our body, we have the power from our brain and innate intelligence. We just have to have the right information, because systems are made of parts. They are all designed to eventually break down. All parts break down, both mechanical, human, mammal, everything can happen. What happens is if you take away, or change the parts or power of information to a plant per se. What happens if you take away the power? Let's say you take away the photosynthesis, or you take away the sun, you put it in the shade. Less light, polluted water, poison in the soil will all affect the entire system. Same thing with us. If we don't have the right nutrition, we don't have the right environment, we don't have the right metabolism, we don't have these things can start to affect our overall system of function. And what happens when you take away or disturb the parts of information in a human being? Same thing. It's a cause and effect. We start to get symptoms. So we need to look at autism in a general as a symptom, as difficult as that is, because it's a huge array of things, and I understand that. But we need to look at it as a system. And this is what Dr. Hardy did. Is he looked at he created the neurodevelopmental quadrangle theory of, it's not a theory, he describes of how things work. So the nervous system, the immune system, the detox system, and the GI system all work under a unanimous or symbiotic relationship in the body. So the nervous system coordinates the immune system and the detoxification system and our GI system. And it all works as one unit. But the environment can affect it. And when we have multiple toxins or malnutrition, we can disrupt this quadrangle, and we create oxidative stress both in the GI system and in the brain. We cause neuroinflammation. This neuroinflammation leads to symptoms, these phenotypes of autism, which can be speech delay, motor delay, function delay, behavioral disintegrative, sensory processing disorder, whatever it may be on the spectrum, is theoried to be neuroinflammation. So it's a whole body thing. It's not just a brain thing. It's not that just the brain's not developing properly. There's a gut connection here. There's an immune system connection here. So now we can start to broaden our perspective as parents, as teachers, as therapists in helping our community and kids on the spectrum to think broader and bigger. So we already talked about the genetic and environmental induced predisposition to autism, which is actually small. I told you it was 15%, right? What are other things that could lead to autism spectrum? Well, the gut, like we just talked about, the gut. Microbe depletion caused by multiple triggers, like things that we don't even choose, like a C-section. That could be a last-minute decision because of the birth process to switch to a C-section last second so that the baby and the mother can succeed in this process of birth, and we end up with a C-section. Or maybe it's planned. Then the child gets antibiotics really early. Right away, they swab the eyes with antibiotics for microbiomes there. We use acetaminophen early, before the age of 1, that's Tylenol, to maybe kill fevers or to help ease fevers. The inability to breastfeed early on, we lose that. And what all of these things do, we're not passing blame. these things are just can happen, and parents can struggle with this, is that it depletes or doesn't create the correct microbiome in the gut. And we need these microorganisms, good and bad, in the gut to protect the lining of the gut. So that's what we're talking about with leaky gut. Everyone's born with a leaky gut. And it takes about 2 years to form the gut health. It just does. And it all starts from birth. Having a natural birth through the vaginal canal allows for a lot more exposure to bacteria very quick in the first moments of life, which helps the gut, believe it or not. Then not using antibiotics to not kill the good flora in the gut, not using acetaminophen, which kills the flora in the gut, and breastfeeding. So breastfeeding and a natural delivery starts a child off on a great foot. However, we still need more moving forward to that. So we start off with a leaky gut, and then we need to, which can lead to autoimmune reactions. So having a leaky gut for a long period of time will lead to autoimmune reactions, allergy sensitivities, hypersensitivities, which leads to brain inflammation, which we call the leaky brain. So it all starts from the gut. So really, really important when we're helping kids and families live healthier and trying to get through this is we have to talk about the gut. And it's not as simple as a probiotic. So it's not just probiotics. So what's next? Where does health come from? Where do we go from here? It's understanding neurodevelopment. So before mom even knows she's pregnant at 25 days of conception, by 3 weeks, the neural cord starts to develop immediately. Within 25 days, this nervous system is starting to integrate and develop. By 35 days, the forebrain is developing. By 100 days, you've got the cortex developed. That's about 3 months pregnant. And you can see by 5, 6, 7 months, we've got a brain stem. We've got a fully grown brain happening here. And by 9 months, we have what we know as a baby that is ready to be born. However, the human brain has sacrificed a little bit of time for development because of the narrow pelvis of the human anatomy. So we are born at about 9 months. Elephants, giraffes, all the other mammals on Earth, horses, their gestational periods are almost closer to 2 years, 1 to 2 years. So 12, 14, 16, 22 months, all the way up to an elephant. And if you watch what happens when a baby is born, a baby elephant's born, is within moments, the elephant can stand, or a giraffe. Within moments, within hours, it can stand. A horse, within a few minutes, they stand up and they start walking. We've sacrificed that. So when we're born, we can't stand up right away because our brain still needs to develop and grow. And that happens. The brain takes 24 months to develop. So 9 to 10 months in utero, and then 14 months afterwards to fully develop to its mature size. So that's the difference between humans and a lot of our mammal counterparts, is it takes a little bit more time. But either way, our brains take 2 years to develop to the full potential. This is a quick graphic about the nervous system, what it looks like. We have our brain stem, we have a brain, and that's covered with this myelin meninges, this myelin sheath that makes the communication from the brain to the body move a lot faster. So this myelin helps everything move a lot faster. The gray matter's in the middle of the spinal cord and in the middle of the brain, and it's encased with bone. We have a skull and vertebra that are stacked on top of one another to protect this nervous system. It's the only system in the human body completely encased in bone. Our organs in our chest have a rib cage, more like a bird cage, protecting it, but the nervous system has an entire bony protective armor. So really, really important stuff there. There's 11 trillion cells just in the nervous system, close to almost 100 trillion cells in the human body. And this is the area we look at right away from the chiropractic perspective, is the brainstem. The spinal cord and its alignment play a huge role in the velocity of information that can go from and to the brain. We use reflexes to measure neural integrity because reflexes can tell us a lot. They're the fastest system in the body. They're faster than we can think or move or twitch. And these reflexes are there to protect us. When we feel heat by the campfire, we'll stay away. If a horn goes off when we're crossing the street, we'll duck, we'll move, or we'll jump out of the way to protect us. These are the reflexes we have, and we use reflexes to measure neural integrity as well. The autonomic nervous system is phenomenal. We're still studying and learning a lot about it, but we know it's divided into parasympathetic and sympathetic systems. And the parasympathetic is the rest and digest portion, and the sympathetic is the fight or flight. Think of it, sympathetic playing sports, when you're running and moving, and we get vasoconstriction, and we get blood pressure increase, and we get blood pumping and all that stuff. That's sympathetic. And when we do parasympathetic, it's rest and digest. We're doing things like digesting our food, opening our pupils more for awareness, and stimulating hormonal cascades. We measure this in our office as well. So sensory integration, and all sensory that we have, hearing, vision, taste, everything is from external sources through our central processing unit, which is our brain, our cerebrum. So we have everything go through and stimulate through the brain, and has to be received, processed, and integrated through the brain. And one of the biggest and most intricate systems when it comes to neurology is the proprioceptive system. We have thousands of sensors throughout our bodies, through all of our joints, discs, muscles, skin, everywhere, that receive information and send it back to the brain to tell us everything from where we are in space to what we're feeling, whether we're in a swimming pool underwater or whether we're above ground and running in the air, wherever it is. Everything's integrated through there, and it's all processed through the brain. And that's what we call the processing cascade. This was another review in our office about his son with tics. He still sees us. This was 6 years ago, and they noticed a tic. He would shrug his shoulders or hum or make a weird tic, and didn't think about chiropractic until he heard me talk, and he brought his son in, and within weeks, the tic started to go away. He stopped humming, and has never done it since, because it was just an integration process and a retained reflex that he maintained from birth, some of the stuff that we do. So the central nervous system is highly complex, but this pyramid of learning is really important for parents. I think parents and teachers to know how the brain develops and starts to learn is it does this through systems and sensory. So right when we're born, it's all about hearing, touching, and proprioception. That's the basics of the brain, and that's where it starts to learn. And within days, and weeks, we move into auditory, visual, olfactory. In those first few weeks with your newborn baby, you're always wondering, can they hear me? They can, but they're just developing that auditory within the first few weeks to months. Then we get motor planning and postural security. Reflex maturity happens about 6 to 9 months, where the reflex maturity starts to move. Then by 1 to 2 years of age, we get the hand-eye coordination, the oculomotor, the postural adjustments, the attention centers to function, perceptual motor increase and development. Then by 5 years of age, we start to get auditory language skills, the above ones. 2 to 5 years old is where they excel with language and start to learn and say more and put sentences together. And then behavior happens after that, the behavior integration. But academic learning is at the top of this pyramid, where cognition and intellect is. And this is really important. If we just pause here for a second, is that this happens at the age of 8 to 9 years of age. And what we do in our society is we start kids through academics at the age of 4, 5, which is a little bit too early when we understand how the pyramid of learning works. It's not until 8 years of age, 9 years of age, where we should be putting them through scholastic learning. So be patient with your 5 to 8 year olds, because it takes time to develop from there. Important to know as a teacher and a parent, where's the disconnect happening? The information process and response. So once we start to understand how this works and how learning works and how the brain works, then we can start to piece things together and revamp synapses in the brain. Trying to find out how the autistic brain is different can be like studying a spinning coin. One side says the circuits are overconnected, the other says they're underconnected. How can the autistic brain do extraordinary things like have a photographic memory of city streets, yet fail to recall a face, store a large vocabulary, yet fall flat in a social setting. And I found this tweet to be very smart. It's exactly how the brain works. It's neither an over or understimulated brain. It's just a synaptic change and development of the brain. So it's called disafferentation. When the information from the brain to the body and the body to the brain is affected, it's called disafferentation. It's an imbalance of sensory information into the brain. So Dr. Deutsch wrote this book, The Brain That Changes Itself, and this next video is about that.
Until very recently, our best and brightest scientists and physicians believed that the adult brain couldn't change. Brain circuits were formed and finalized in childhood. Now we discover the brain's plastic and changeable. But not all change is good. That changing brain can actually do its harm. Obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and even schizophrenia. But the mind can harness the damaged brain's plasticity to change itself. Now we are finding new treatments for mental diseases and disorders once thought incurable.
When you would tell people, hey, this is your brain sending you a false message, it would help them.
We might actually change the whole course, the whole trajectory of someone's life.
This is medicine. This has outcomes that are medical. It changes brains physically. It changes them chemically. It changes them functionally. We do not yet see where the limits will be. They are still big new surprises.
My name is Dr. Norman Deutsch, and I wrote a book called The Brain That Changes Itself. The discovery of neuroplasticity is the discovery that our brains can change their structure and function through mental experience alone. It signals the most important change in our understanding of the brain in 400 years, because for 400 years, we thought of the brain as though it were like a machine with parts. And that view of the machine-like brain gave rise to a neurological fatalism, because it meant people who were born with brain damage or who sustained brain damage as they developed were condemned to live with it, because machines do many glorious things, but they don't grow new parts, and they can't reorganize themselves.
So he just shows that the brain is neuroplastic, means that it can change. And Dr. Melillo says the same thing from the Carrick Institute. You know, the feedback created by primitive reflexes, which we use in checking our kids with examinations, and postural reflexes result in a more complex interaction with the body. So we can do Gallant's and Babinski's and all these tests to see and coordinate with the brain, and then adjust the spine, and then retest and adjust the spine and retest. And within weeks to months, we see amazing changes in the synaptic potential of the brain, which helps with a lot of these symptoms that we were talking about. So what's next? It takes a village. It really does take a village. It takes support to help our kids move forward with all this stuff. So back to the quadrangle that we were talking about. Well, now that we know that it's bigger than just the brain and it can be the gut, is we really need to talk about the nutrition and the toxins and minimizing neuroinflammation through the process of trying to help children on the spectrum. So this is the wheel we follow in our office. Number one is the nervous system and genetics. And we talked about this. This is what most of the presentation was about. Then the first step becomes the food, the power and the fuel. We need to remove the wrong foods from the child's diet. We have to get rid of the neuroinflammation and the gut inflammation. And we need to substitute the right foods and nutrition and support and the brain support and supplements to help minimize the inflammation. We have to. So that is the most difficult part of this entire thing. And a lot of parents are ahead of the 8 ball when it comes here. They're revamping all their kids' diet. Most of the parents I talk to now compared to 15 years ago are like, we're dairy free, we're gluten free, we don't eat processed foods. They're super cleaning up their diet, but very difficult with some kids on the spectrum who are very sensory, who only eat certain textures. I mean, that becomes very difficult to change their diet. We understand this. However, we do have to work on something to help the neuroinflammation in the body. Then once we start that and we make the proper changes in the gut, digestion can start to happen properly and the gut heals itself. That's the cool part about this. There's no probiotic in the world that you can just throw at the gut to heal. It needs to heal because remember, those first 2 years of our life is where we heal a leaky gut naturally. We don't heal it. Sorry, the gut forms. It takes 2 years for the gut to form with the right flora, and that's what closes the leakiness of the gut. So proteins and everything pass through our gut very, very quickly. That's why we don't feed kids foods before 1 or before 6 months, depending on what books you read. Food before 1 is just for fun. We say that because it comes from a scientific background of that the gut just cannot metabolize or break down because of the flora not being in there. It's not that the gut itself can't absorb the nutrition. The gut can. It just doesn't have the right flora because it's bacteria that helps us digest and break down foods. Proteins, carbohydrates, and fats are all broken down by bacteria and organisms. So that's it. So once we have and built up, it takes about a year or 2 years to be exposed to enough stuff, putting our hands in our mouth and eating our fingers, as babies, we're trying to get that bacteria into the body on purpose. That's why your kids go outside and sometimes will throw dirt right in their mouth or suck on a rock. It's a natural behavior because we're trying to build that gut. So that's where repair can happen. Once the cells, organs, and systems have a barrier in place, they can start to heal, and then we can help immune system supports, and then we start to detoxify. We go through a detoxification phase, excretion, and then we start to address parasites that might be in the body as well. And this can be done through gut, stool testing, and even blood work. Movement and behavior, and that's where the reflexes, creating new patterns through chiropractic care. So we can start chiropractic care all the way from number 2, but it's difficult because we need to do 2, 3, and 4 before we start to put the movement behaviors in there. We can start movement, we can start everything right away and work on the food at the same time to make this process quicker. But some kids just need to heal first and then get into movement therapies. So OT, chiropractic, PT, occupational therapy, all these things that we do, we got to get through 2, 3, and 4 first before we can get into movement therapy. I hope that makes sense, the proprioceptive therapy. So the disconnect from a chiropractic perspective is that we have this disafferentation because of subluxation, because of misalignment, not dislocation of the spine, but a subluxation of the spine. And we can have multiple subluxations throughout the spine. And these misalignments lead to neurophysiological function and changes. And that's where we get symptoms. So negative neuroplastic changes because of the misalignment, decreased blood flow or cerebrospinal fluid flow to the brain or out of the brain, and mechanical cord tension that can happen there. And these lead to physiological impacts. And we've seen the research in cervical spine manipulations, how they alter sensory motor integration. So we get spinal dysfunction, we get altered afferent input to the central nervous system, and then we see neuroplastic changes take place both following increased and decreased efferent input. So any type of change to the spinal cord can have hyper or hypotonicity through the spinal column. And that leads to some type of symptom. And that's what we see that in adults who have not been diagnosed with autism. We see that in the spine all the time. These subluxations can lead to other types of symptoms. It can lead to muscular pain, joint pain. It can lead to muscle spasm. It can lead to tingling. It can lead to decreased strength in the hand, and these are all just symptoms. The same thing we're talking about these kids, these symptoms. So when we adjust the spine and remove the interferences, we improve symptoms. We improve physiology. That's what ends up happening. So subluxation and neuroplasticity, vertebral subluxation creates neuroplastic changes. Negative usually, that create lasting functional and neurophysiological changes in the central nervous system. So that creates altered afferent input. By getting adjusted, we can improve these things. Movement of the spine stimulates the cerebellum in a positive way, which is responsible for coordination of full body movement. This is why occupational therapy, PT, all these things can work for kids, because we stimulate the cerebellum in a positive way. Again, one piece to the puzzle. This was a study from the Chiropractic Journal of Medicine. Sympathetic and parasympathetic responses to specific diversified adjustments to chiropractic. So getting adjusted, the result was that diastolic pressure dropped significantly post-adjustment among those receiving cervical adjustments, accompanied by moderate clinical effect. Pulse pressure increased significant among those. And we just saw all these positive parasympathetic effects right after the adjustment. Pretty cool stuff there. And then HRV, we use this in our office. We use HRV analysis on children and adults because we want to show what the effect, or see what the effect of an adjustment can do. So we do that in our office, and we use thermography. This was the anatomic dystonia may be evaluated by measuring skin temperature. And this was the child with speech delay at the beginning. This is a PET MRI, which shows an active brain during any type of movement. So this was a 26-year-old female. She was put through this MRI. She was told to wiggle her left big toe. And the pre-scan had a large portion of her brain in orange, a lot of activity. She was removed for the MRI. She was adjusted, and within 10 minutes put back into the MRI to do the PET scan again. She moved her big toe, and that was the imaging, that yellow that you see right here, of moving her big toe on the right side of her brain, was how much energy it should take to move your big toe. But that's what happens when you have too many kinks along the garden hose, is that the water doesn't flow properly. So by getting adjusted, her spinal column was freed, and immediately she could see the change in her function. Very cool stuff there. CSF and blood flow compromise, same thing. We see this at C1 and C2 in the upper neck. That's how we can affect blood pressure and blood flow. This was Odessa, her daughter. She had seizures ever since she was 2 years old, and found us. And for the first time in 18 years, she went from 15 to 25 daily seizures to nothing, seizure-free for 7 months. Amazing stuff that happens there. That's seizures, headaches. I don't know how many more examples I can share with you. This stuff works. Find the right people in your community that do this type of work, and that's how you build your village. But remember, subluxations can be caused from multiple different things. Physical is the most common one. We fall, we get hit, we play sports. We think that, the spine can be physically damaged, and it's true, but it can be chemically and mentally. Mental stress, chemical stress, and physical stress can all lead to vertebral subluxation. So how common are these? They start at birth. This study done by Dr. Gutman was, he took 1,000 infants. They were checked in the first month of life. 80% were found to have an upper vertebral misalignment of the upper neck because of the birthing process. It's difficult. They redid the study again later with 1,250, and it was found that 90% had suffered birth trauma and strain through the neck and cranial areas, with 10% suffering severe trauma. The 10% was like maybe dystocia, torticollis, the side effects that can happen through birth. But 90% of all the kids were found to have misalignments or subluxations in their neck after birth. So it starts early. These things can be checked, and these are things that can be checked quite quickly. In our office, we look at everything that can happen during birth. Kiss syndrome is where the atlas gets stuck against the skull. It touches the skull and doesn't pull away. And this can lead to proprioceptive signals, this disorganization right there, where kids, won't crawl, or they won't hold their head up properly, or they feel like they have muscle weakness. And these are the, reasons from pregnancy to birth. This stuff that just happens: a long labor, a C-section, a vacuum extraction. Maybe it was twins or triplets. I mean, that's stressful for everybody involved in that one. Prenatal positional anomalies like a breech presentation, whatever it may be. These are the stresses that can lead to birth traumas. And these are quite common things. C-sections and long labors, those are actually quite common. The birth process, even under optimal controlled conditions, is potentially a traumatic, crippling event for the fetus. And that was Dr. Abraham Tobin. all these MDs just agreeing that, brainstem injury in newborn and infants is something that they've studied, and it's just part of the process. That's what the medical community says. It's just part of the process of birth. We try our best to always improve, but that's why we get kids checked as early as possible. We've been called straight to births with midwives. As soon as everything's done and the baby's deemed healthy, within the first few minutes, we're checking them for subluxation. And for all the ones I've done over my career, I've always found something to adjust on a newborn baby. Pretty amazing. So you can bring them in as early as you like. If you don't want to leave the house, you can call us. If you find a good pediatric chiropractor in your area, they are more than happy to make a house call for those particular. Those are what we live for. So just like a drug commercial at the end, we have to tell you all the possible side effects of chiropractic. And this is a review of the literature. Getting adjusted improves your autonomic function, your endocrine function, your cardiovascular function, your immune function, your muscle strength, your overall athletic ability, your heart rate variability, your range of motion, your respiration, your stress, your reproductive hormone. I mean, I'm joking. This is all positive stuff. So by getting adjusted, there's only benefits to it, especially for kids. It's such a gentle process. There is no cracking or popping with children because they don't have joints developed enough for any of that. So it's all light touch, craniosacral type work, very simple stuff. We do pre and post scans, and we do this to measure. We use data in our office to measure these things. This was the nonverbal child that we were working with. She would not let me scan her back. She would that's all I could do is pull down the collar on her shirt and get her neck. She had tons of inflammation in every joint in her neck. 4 weeks later, she lets me do the entire back, because now her sensory integration was better. By this point, she was saying 100 words. And you can see how we still had some work to do in the neck, C4, C5 right there, a little bit of heat there. But man, what a change in 4 weeks. By 4 months, 16 weeks, she was up to 200 words. And trust me, that was one happy family there. And these stories just keep going and going and going. So if you need any help, reach out to us. We're here for you. And we love what we do. And that's my wife with our firstborn when she was 6 or 7 months old there. But they love it. We make it super easy for kids. Every pediatric chiropractor in the area makes it super fun for kids. And that's what we're here for. Reach out to us at any time. I hope this presentation helps you in one way or another. And all of our information will be involved right here here you go. There's our website. You can find us on social media. And we're here for you anytime.